So now we're inside step 4, so we're almost there at the end now, closing in on the finish line. So there are 3 to-dos in this step, and you'll notice that when you look at the starting file, I've got the different stages of Hangman as ASCII art for us to be able to use. And they go from 6, so which is the start of the Hangman with no man, all the way down to 0, where the art is complete, and that's when the user would be in game over status. And we're going to combine that, among other things, into our game. So let's first take a look at a run of the solution. So this is what we're aiming to achieve by the end of this step. So we want to be able to guess a letter, and you'll notice that when you guess a correct letter, then the Hangman art does not progress. So if the word is baboon, I guess B, then there is firstly art with no man, and then if I guess another correct letter, you'll see the art doesn't change. It's still just the rack. Now, if I guess a incorrect letter, let's try F, you'll see that the Hangman picture starts appearing. And if I keep guessing incorrect letters, you'll see that the person is slowly being drawn until we get to the very, very end, where we end up with the complete image, which is image 0 in our list called stages. And at this point, we get the message, you lose. So that's all that we're trying to achieve in this particular step. And if you take a look in the to-dos, either in the description, now that this is updated, or in the main.py, you should be able to see the individual steps which you have to go through. So to-do number 1 is to create a variable called lives to keep track of how many lives the user has left. They start out with 6, and once that reaches 0, then the game should stop and it should print you lose. So how does it go down to 0? Well, every time the user guesses a letter that is not in the chosen word, then we have to reduce their lives by 1 until eventually at some point it'll reach 0 and they lose. Now finally, we're going to incorporate the ASCII art from this list, which is called stages, that I've added in the starting file for you. And you're going to print it out so that it corresponds to the current number of lives the user has remaining. And you might want to print out the stages using different indices or different positions to pick out different pictures and just get a feel for how they're ordered. So that's all there is to it. And if you're ready, then go ahead and pause the video now and attempt step 4. All right, so let's start from to-do number 1. This is probably the easiest to do out of this whole project. Create a variable called lives and set it equal to 6. That's it, to-do number 1 done. Next, if the guess, so the current letter that the user has guessed based on their input, is not a letter in the chosen word, so it doesn't exist in the chosen word, then we need to reduce lives by 1. Now, you might remember that we have this if elif else statement here that checks to see if the guess is equal to the letter in the chosen word. So by looping through each of the letters and one of them matches the guess, then this section does correspond to when the letter is in the chosen word, but it does not correspond to when the letter is not in the chosen word. So the situation where the user has guessed the letter that does not exist in the word. So rather than targeting the elephant else or messing with this if statement, we can actually simply just write a completely separate statement so that we keep our logic separate and under different banners, and it will probably be easier to debug as well. So we can use the not in keyword. So we can say if the guess is not in the chosen word, then under this condition, do we reduce the number of lives minus equals 1. And then if at this point, after we've subtracted 1 from lives, if lives is now equal to 0 at this point, well, then that's game over, right? So we set game over to true, and that means we break out of our while loop. And in addition, we're also going to tell the user that this has happened by telling them you lose. So that's to do number 2 tackled. Now the final to do is simply just to print the ASCII art from this list corresponding to the current number of lives. Now, very helpfully, I've ordered the art in this list so that they correspond to the number of lives. So it starts out at 0, of course. This is what the picture should display when the user has 0 lives. And also it goes all the way up to 6, so that when the user has 6 lives, full lives, then you don't see the man at all. So that means it's as simple as simply getting the right indentation, so being inside our while loop, because we want to print these ASCII art each time the user makes a guess. And then we simply use the print statement to tap into that list, and then use the square brackets to choose the correct index or the correct position for the art we want to display. And as I just mentioned, it's matched to our lives situation. So that's all that we need to do in order to complete this to do. And now if you run this code, you'll see that as long as I keep guessing the right letter, my art remains on this particular picture, which is corresponding to lives equals 6. And then as I make incorrect guesses, then my hangman picture starts progressing all the way until I end up with no lives, which is the last picture here, lives equals 6, and I get the you lose printed out. So did you manage to solve these steps? I would say this particular step is probably a little bit easier than some of the previous ones, but as you've noticed, the difficulty can vary in this project, and just want to guide you from step to step, making sure that each to-do and each of the step codes actually make sense. So if there's something you realize about previous steps that doesn't make sense, go back and rewatch it, and just make sure that all the code that you see at this stage makes perfect sense to you and that you would be able to write it from scratch.
Thanks for watching the video till the end. Please leave your thoughts below so we can discuss more about the topic. If you'd like to suggest a video that could help the community, feel free to message me on X or Instagram. We also share short videos on Instagram, so make sure to follow us there. Feel free to reach out. We'd love to hear from you, and might even create a video based on your suggestion. Thanks again for being part of our community. See you in the next video.